my girlfriend. She's trying to.
There was brain matter. She never even saw this coming.
She was 16 years old. Hasn't even got to live life yet.
At 9:45 a.m. on September 6, 2020, emergency services receive an emotional call at the Forest Motel regarding a shooting victim.
Who shot her? Do you know?
No, I know a few weeks ago she got into my sister and another girl next door to Tiesta.
This girl that she had an altercation with, what's her name?
It's her sister, Desiree.
All right. What's your name, sir?
Jamal Redding.
It was a Sunday. My former captain, Ryan Neal, called me on my phone and said that Ridgeland Police Department had a murder and that they were requesting regional agents and crime scene and that I was needed to respond to the scene. The door wasn't shut all the way. I sort of just pushed it open, and as soon as the door swung open, you could see she was sitting up in the bed, kind of slumped to her left side with obvious gunshot wound to her forehead.
It was a bloody scene, and there was brain matter on the wall, all the way up to the ceiling. There was a lot of blood to the left side of her and on the sheets. They also noticed that there's been no forced entry. The lock and the bolts and everything are intact. They should have taken Brian Redding out of the motel room first, but they didn't. He was on the phone for a large part of that time when police were present. Several of my first responders noted that he would wail every now and again. He seemed to be talking quickly and without a whole lot of emotion. He did call Cypress's sisters actually shortly thereafter.
I was leaving Florida with my kids. We were up there with our Papa Steve. We were loading up in the car, getting ready to head back to Ridgeland, and Cypress's Facebook was calling me. It was Brian. And he was like, she's unresponsive, she's unresponsive. I'm like, dude, you need to calm down and tell me what's going on. He went into detail about his morning, what he did that morning. I don't care about your morning. Is my sister okay? Is she breathing? Is she okay? And then he said, no, she's been shot in the head. She's dead.
I was sleeping. My kid's father woke me up to my neighbor at the door. I happened to be living at the apartments next door to the hotel. All I heard was her tell him that wake Desiree up right now. Like, I need her to come right now.
Due to the 911 call, Detective Katie McAllister has to interview Cypress' sister Desiree as a potential suspect.
We went down to the station to talk to her. Brian called the police, and in the call, he's basically crying, saying his girlfriend was shot in the head. And then they asked, do you know who did it? He instantly stopped crying and was like, I don't know, but she got into an altercation with her sister next door. He mentioned mine and her fight from like 3 weeks before.
What led up to the fight between y'all? Brian. She thought I wanted Brian. She thought me and my friend wanted Brian.
He was telling her that I was coming on to him and all this other crazy stuff, and he asked me to do something inappropriate for him. And I told Cypress. After that, I wasn't allowed to be around her. I wasn't allowed to talk to her.
Mr. Redding was still on scene. He had already given Ridgeland Police a statement. We took him to the local police department, and I re-interviewed him.
Did you have anything to do with the death of Cypress Noonan?
I don't feel like I do.
What do you mean by that?
Because I don't get into it. Last time I got into it, somebody was months ago.
I'm asking if you personally did anything to her that would have caused her death.
No.
I learned that Mr. Redding at the time was 32 years old and that Miss Noonan was 16. He said they were happy that he was helping her get a job and her driver's license and the necessary things that you need to get a job. So I immediately had some concerns with that.
They met at the laundromat. She was cleaning out my van. She noticed him at the laundromat and thought he was cute. How they connected and speaking or anything like that, I have no idea. I actually worked at Waffle House with Brian a couple years before he met Cypress. I got a weird feeling from him then, but I just felt like oh, maybe it's just because he's trying to hit on me. I told him, hey, I got a boyfriend, and...
Everybody disapproved. She brought him to our home one time, and I told her she can stay, but he had to leave. Next thing I know, she's leaving with him. And every time I would report it, nothing would happen. They stayed constantly at the forest. They were there for a good while. Nobody was allowed in that room. He would get really mad if there was.
Detectives interviewed Brian Redding to piece together his whereabouts on the morning of the murder.
What time did you leave this morning?
I got up for to take a shower. I asked you to call me around 6. What she ended up doing was she called me at 6:44, but I put over Parker's because I had a little flap in on the right side.
He started his morning off extremely early and made sure a number of people saw him and, you know, basically had a very crowded schedule all before 9:45 for a man that doesn't work.
1 month after Cypress Noonan's murder at the Forest Motel, detectives bring Brian Redding back in for questioning.
He says that he's been away all morning. He took a shower, he says, before 6 a.m., goes to Beaufort, stops at Parker's, which is the gas station, on the way into Beaufort, where he was picking up his girlfriend whose car he had. When he was on surveillance, he was dressed in a Batman shirt. That was not what he was dressed in when he came back to the scene and found Cypress at 9:45 a.m. When he was photographed at his interview, he did not have any blood on him. So we do believe that he cleaned himself up at some point, washing his hands, changing his shirt.
He could not produce that Batman shirt when we asked him for it.
Detectives then get a crucial breakthrough from the crime lab.
The shell casing was sent to the lab for ballistics testing. It could have only been fired from a specific SCCY, or some people call it a Sky, handgun. Her family had told us that she was in possession of a Tiffany blue handgun of that make and caliber. It was not recovered at the scene.
There are videos on your phone when you and Amber the day before she gets shot. It has dates on the photos. When we did your cell phone dump, it has dates of those photos and those videos. And there's also a video of Cypress with that same gun the Friday before. That's the gun she was shot with.
When our crime scene unit responded to the Forest Motel, the blood was visible on the door. They did swab that to identify whose blood it was, and then our forensics laboratory did their magic. We were left with 2 names as a result of those DNA. Miss Noonan and Mr. Redding. It indicated that Mr. Redding and Miss Noonan would have had to be there in that room at the time that blood was left.
Do you have a special arrested on your shorts that you were wearing?
What shorts?
The shorts that you were wearing.
With the cell phone forensics, we found evidence that Miss Noonan was talking with her brother, Greg, and she was trying to leave him, and it was kept secret. She did not want Mr. Redding to know that she was leaving. He was upset about that, and it ultimately led to a fatal argument. So at that point, we believe that Mr. Redding was responsible for Cypress Noonan's murder.
Brian Redding was charged with 1 count of murder, possession of a weapon in a violent crime, and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. 2 years later, Brian Redding's murder trial begins.
The trial started August 15th of 2022 in the Jasper County Courthouse. Brian had to stick to somewhat of a script because he had already given a statement. And so if he were to deviate from that, I can impeach him with that former statement. He seemed very confident at trial. He presented himself as Cypress's savior. You know, that he was just helping her. I mean, by keeping her locked up in a hotel room with no money and, you know, doing nothing at all, I don't know how that's her A game.
The jury is then sent off to deliberate on whether there is enough evidence to convict Brian Redding of murdering Cypress Noonan. But it's not even an hour before the jury has reached a verdict.
I looked at my watch. It was about 30 minutes. It was very fast, and he was found guilty of murder and possession of a weapon.
He was sentenced to 48 years Between the conviction and the sentence, he's gonna spend, if not the rest of his life in prison, pretty darn close to it.